Hello friends and neighbors, and welcome to a very special episode of the Video Nasty Project. The reason I'm doing this is because recently I found an old episode of Sneak Previews where Siskel and Ebert discussed an issue that was actually really germane to the heart of the project. Well, here, I'll let Gene lay it out for you. Take it away, Gene.
Now, normally on Sneak Previews, Roger and I review new movies. This week, however, we're going to be looking at a group of recent films that have some very ugly things in common. All of these films are thrillers featuring extreme violence directed at young women. To put it bluntly, what you see in most of these films is a lot of teenage girls being raped or stabbed to death, usually both.
Oh goody, an episode all about horror movies. Right up my alley. Alright, so first, I have a huge, deep respect for those two. Me growing up watching Sneak Previews as a kid is more or less directly responsible for the Video Nasty Project. Plus, I gotta love a man who gave the world Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So as I was watching their episode, I kept thinking, boy, these guys are really wrong on pretty much everything they had to say. So I thought it would be kind of fun to do this rebuttal video to all their bullet points. Okay, first of all, let's back up to what Gene just said.
All of these films are thrillers featuring extreme violence directed at young women. To put it bluntly, what you see in most of these films is a lot of teenage girls being raped or stabbed to death, usually both.
Well, wait a minute. This is a man. And this is a man. And this is a man. That's a man. This is a man. In fact, just to make sure that I wasn't talking out of my ass, I went and double-checked the body counts on the first 8 Friday the 13th movies. In those flicks, the males consistently outnumbered the female victims, sometimes as much as a 2-to-1 ratio. I also did a quick spot check of the first couple of Halloween movies and the first couple of Elm Street movies, and those two follow this pattern. Now, admittedly, this is one very small sample out of the hundreds and hundreds of slasher flicks out there, but it seems to be a very solid trend. We continue.
One of the things these so-called women in danger films all have in common is that they portray women as helpless victims. And after you've sat through a dozen or so of these films, as Gene and I have unfortunately had to, they all fall into the same pattern. A woman or a young girl is shown alone, isolated, and defenseless, and then come suspense-building scenes where the girl thinks she's about to be attacked, but she isn't, and then just when you think everything's going to be okay and nothing's going to happen, a crazy killer springs out of the shadows and attacks her, and frequently the killer sadistically threatens the victim before he strikes.
Helpless women, huh? Well, how about her? Or her. Or that one. Or her. Or that one.
Okay, asshole. Let's dance.
Scared? Absolutely. Defenseless? Not so much. Yes, there are women in these movies who get victimized, but it's usually the woman who fights back at the very end and gets the upper hand on the killer. So much so that the last character standing is called the final girl, even when it's not a girl. Also, there have been scream queens like Heather Langenkamp who have gone on record saying that they are very proud of the work they've done in these movies. Is it empowering? I don't know, but at least the stars had no issue with the content. Oh, and I want to roll back to the very last thing that Ebert said.
And frequently, the killer sadistically threatens the victim before he strikes.
I don't know what slasher flicks they're watching, but generally the ones I see, the killer is usually all business. Jason, he's not going to fuck around terrorizing. He's just, boom, fuck your shit up and call it an evening. Same thing with Michael Myers. He is all business, no talk, no nothing, just gets his shit done. You could make a case that Freddy Krueger does that, But his whole MO is terrorizing people. Nightmare. That's what he does. The final girl, they will usually have a protracted chase where there's a little bit of cat and mouse between the killer and the girl, and will he get her, will she get away, and so on and so on and so on. But, again, that's the person who fucks the killer up at the very end.
That's what's happening in this scene from last year's sleazy movie, When a Stranger Calls, which has now been re-released because of the recent upsurge of the popularity of these films about attacks on women. In this scene, that woman's been told to keep the caller on the line who's been threatening her until the police can trace the call.
Hello?
Oh, did you people not watch the movie past the first fucking 20 minutes? Yes, When a Stranger Calls is front-loaded with a whole bunch of the calls are coming from inside the house terror moments against the babysitter. After that, however, the movie is all about this poor guy putting his life back together after getting out of an insane asylum. It's a fucking character study, not a slasher movie.
You know, a lot of people think that the battle has been won in Hollywood on films about women. They think that now women have parity with men, that there's strong women images in the films. Jill Clayburgh and an unmarried woman, Jane Fonda, in every picture she makes. Got it all wrong. Fonda and Clayburgh make one film a year, maybe, right? These films are coming out week after week, playing to millions of people, and the dominant image in American films today on women is not Fonda and Clayburgh. It's women like that, cowering in the corner, knives being brandished in their faces, being raped, being sliced apart. That's what's going on in American movies. That's why we're doing this show.
All right, you got me there. The disparity between the female leads and the male leads is still way the hell out of balance. But that's not necessarily something that's exclusive to horror movies. That's across the spectrum in Hollywood. And hell, that's probably outside of Hollywood, overseas, that male leads still dominate. Okay, you got me there.
I had the perfect trifecta never to be able to work in this town. I was a woman, I'm a minority Asian American, and I was super young. I was only in my 20s when I was directing Night Patrol and Blood Diner. All three of those things were considered deficits, were considered a liability. Nobody was coming to me saying, Jackie, do you want to direct a movie? I had to slam my way through and get these films made. The sad part is I did this, almost 30 years ago, and things have not changed much in the industry.
If you're looking for strong female leads, horror flicks give you that. Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, Heather Langenkamp, Sigourney Weaver, and I will fight anyone who says that Alien and Aliens is not a horror movie. So, there are strong female leads in abundance.
And here are some examples. There's Prom Night, with teenage girls being slaughtered at their high school prom. The ad campaign is, if you're not back by midnight, you won't be coming home. There's Don't Go in the House. A guy who was tortured by his mother burns 3 women to death. The cell line here is, you have been warned.
Don't Go in the House is not a slasher movie. Don't Go in the House is a character study, a psychological thriller about a deeply disturbed individual who has been living with his oppressive, abusive mother his entire life. And so that when she dies, he has nowhere to focus his energy and his rage and his anger, and so he takes it on helpless women. Yes, women die in rather extreme ways, but it is not an inherently misogynistic movie beyond the themes of an abusive relationship with your parents. These traits have not been shown in a good light during the movie. He is a bad guy. He is mentally broken.
And there's The Howling, a new movie about a woman who goes alone on a vacation and is tortured by the locals. The come-on line here is, imagine your worst fear, a reality.
Aha! Busted. So apparently The Howling, which is a disgusting and misogynistic movie, is 2-star worthy. Hey, for fun, let's take a look at some other disgusting and misogynistic movies that he also gave 2 stars to. We've got Rope, Airport, The Elephant Man, For Your Eyes Only, and Xanadu, no accounting for taste, and Die Hard. Apparently Die Hard is a disgusting and misogynistic 2-star movie also. But even worse, a little bit down the road in the episode, they utterly rip apart Motel Hell. He gave 3 stars to that. It'd be nice if you got your story straight, guys.
A lot of people have the wrong idea. They identify these films with earlier thrillers like Psycho, or even a more recent film like Halloween, which we both like. These films aren't in the same category. These films hate women.
So, horror movie filmmakers hate women, huh? All right. Fine, let's ask somebody who probably knows just a little bit about the subject. He's made 1 or 2 slasher movies and horror movies in his day. Let's see if he's ever had any problem with the women filmmakers giving him grief for his product.
Humanoids from the Deep was one of our most successful creature films. I had a woman director on that, whereas normally you would have a male director on this type of film. But I've always felt a good director can direct anything, and I told her before the shooting, here is the situation. Remember this. The humanoids kill the men and rape the women. She said, got it. The humanoids kill the men and rape the women. She shot the killing of the men in the most gory fashion imaginable. It was so terrible on the screen.
All right, let's take a look and see what the director of Slumber Party Massacre had to say about being a woman and directing a slasher flick.
I still think there's some people who think that I did something horrible by directing a slasher movie. I guess they haven't seen it, and maybe they missed the fact that it's a comedy, which it is. It's both a slasher film and a comedy.
All right, you say, that's cheating. Maybe Roger Corman's studio was a very progressive place to work in the 70s. That's not fair, you say. All right, fine. Let's see what the director of Blood Diner has to say about being a woman and making slasher movies.
And I also wanted people to know that I'm not a man, that I'm a woman. When this film first came out, no one thought a woman could direct such a outrageous film. In a genre that's completely male-dominated, I outdid the guys.
So I could sit here all day long and give you soundbite after soundbite after soundbite of people in the industry and women who don't have any issue with being in a slasher movie. Executive producers, writers, directors, and on down the line. Or you could just read for yourself.
And unfortunately, the audiences that go to them don't seem to like women too much either. Now, we go to see these films in movie theaters. These are not the kinds of movies where they have nice private little screenings for the critics. And to sit there surrounded by people who are identifying not with the victim, but with the attacker, with the killer, who are cheering these killers on, is a very scary experience.
Yeah, the movies are played so that they really are in favor almost of the killer and really against the women cowering back.
Yes, horror movie audiences are going to be excitable and shout at the screen because that's how they roll. In all the screenings I've ever been to of all the horror movies, and that's not an insignificant number, I have always seen people shouting, "Don't go into the basement," or "Hey, don't split up," or, stupid stuff like that. This isn't necessarily that they're sympathizing with Jason or whoever, but more that they're just into the crowd. They're just getting excited and enjoying the moment. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody out there is a rapist and a sex offender just waiting to prey on a woman.
You know what I think misleads a lot of people when they look at the newspaper ads or ads on television for these movies? They see that R rating and they think, well, R, that means if you're under 17, you have to take along a parent or an adult guardian. It can't be that bad. Maybe they've seen other R-rated films, like this summer you had The Blue Lagoon and had a little low-key nudity in it, or The Blues Brothers, which really wasn't too extreme, and so they say, well, that's not so bad. They have no idea. I agree with you about I Spit on Your Grave. That is the most violent, extreme, grotesque, nauseating R-rated picture I've ever seen, and I just don't understand how the R rating has grown so large as to include these films, which in my opinion go right off the map of any kind of good taste.
Yeah, no argument from me there. The rating system as it currently stands today is broken. If the studios were only willing to use the NC-17 as it was originally intended, not necessarily for porno, but for adult films where it is not suitable for any other age bracket, then we could avoid problems like The Blues Brothers, a reasonably benign movie that has an R rating only because it used the word fuck twice, and something truly demented and sickening like a Serbian film getting the same rating. Well, there you go. But then really Hollywood only cares about one rating anymore, PG-13. G-rated movies, stuff that used to include adult movies like Airport and Silent Running and Funny Girl, those are gone. It's all children now. R-rated movies, you occasionally get your Deadpools and whatnot, but as far as Hollywood goes, the money is where PG-13 is, and I've gotten way the fuck off topic. So, let us continue.
I think at this point somebody is probably wondering why.
Why?
Why
exactly?
now? Why is this happening? I have a theory. In the last couple of months that I've been seeing these pictures, I'm convinced it has something to do with the growth of the women's movement in America in the last decade. I think that these films are some sort of primordial response by some very sick people of men saying, get back in your place, women. These women in the films are typically portrayed as independent, as sexual, as enjoying life, and the killer typically, not all the time, but most often, is a man who is sexually frustrated with these new, aggressive women. And so he strikes back at them, he throws knives at them, he can't deal with them, he cuts them up, he kills them. Get back in your place, it's against the women's movement.
And guess what? Gene is absolutely right. Horror movies, good horror movies that is, have always reacted to the current societal fears. Godzilla, for example, was the direct response to the fear of atomic war and Japan's attempts to reconcile having two cities blown clean off the map. The original Invasion of the Body Snatchers was our fears of the Red Menace and communism made manifest. The '79 remake was nothing more than the fear of authority figures in the wake of Watergate. Night of the Living Dead, that was chock-a-block full with social commentary on the civil rights movement. So yes, having a pro-female movie like I Spit on Your Grave come out during the women's liberation movement is a no-brainer.
And the killer typically, not all the time, but most often, is a man who is sexually frustrated with these new, aggressive women. And so he strikes back at them, he throws knives at them, he can't deal with them, he cuts them up, he kills them. Get back in your place, it's against the women's movement.
Wait, stop right there. Okay, Pamela Voorhees was driven by external sexual promiscuity, but not out of a sex drive. She was driven by revenge on those who were. Jason and Leatherface, they probably don't even know what sex was, for God's sakes. Michael certainly wasn't driven by sex. You might be able to make an argument for Freddy, being that the pre-burned Freddy Krueger was fucking little kids. But generally, as a rule, the horror and slasher movies that I've seen have not been driven by a sexual urge. Now, when you deal with thousands and thousands of movies, obviously there's going to be occasions, yes. But as a rule, not what I've seen. Okay, take somebody like Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, a man who killed so many prostitutes that he lost count. When he was a teenager, he admitted to having violent sexual fantasies about his mother. As an adult, he had sex with prostitutes, and his victims were specifically prostitutes. There have been tons and tons of studies about the link between sexual deviancy and fetishes and sexual impulse control and serial killers. So let's assume for a second they're correct, and that slasher movies are chock-a-block full of sexual predators and misogyny and deviancy. Then that is just simply a reflection of real life.
And in the movie Friday the 13th, an independent female camp counselor goes out on her own and hitchhikes a ride with the wrong driver.
Hi. I'm going to Camp Crystal Lake.
Now that scene demonstrates a very common and probably very significant technique that's used again and again in these films. We view a scene through the eyes of the killer. You never saw the driver in that last scene. Instead, you saw everything through the driver's eyes. Now, in the traditional horror movie, we often saw things from the victim's point of view, but that's no longer. Now we look through the killer's eyes. It's almost as if the audience is being asked to identify with the attackers in these movies, and that really bothers me.
Come on. Really? Really? Look, unlike the later movies where everybody knew that Jason was the responsible party behind the killings, the very first installment of Friday the 13th was playing it as a whodunit. It wasn't so much to put you in the shoes of Pamela Voorhees, it was to conceal her identity as the killer. Spoilers, by the way, for a 40-year-old movie. Look, did Halloween try and get you to identify with young Michael? No. You were seeing through his eyes, weren't you, though? So how come Friday doesn't get a pass and Halloween does? But please, continue.
One other thing that bothers me is that the behavior that these women are engaging in, if done by men, would be considered brave, bold, and fun. Going hitchhiking, you know, going across the country like an Easy Rider, very typical. A woman tries to do something like that in these films, whammo, they get sliced up.
Wait a minute. Remind me again how Easy Rider ended? Oh, no, that's... Well, that didn't end so well for them now, did it? So much for the freewheeling lifestyle.
Also, many of the attacks in these films are on women who are scantily clad. And I think that the intent here is to also exploit the sex angle in these pictures. The nudity is always gratuitous. It's just put in the film only to titillate the audience and maybe make one other point, that women who dress this way or merely uncover their bodies are somehow asking for trouble and somehow deserve the trouble they get. That's a very sick idea.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and try and deny that movies like SS Experiment Camp or The Beast in Heat or hell, Porky's is nothing but tits for tits' sake. Exploitation movies are a product. Sex sells, therefore sex in exploitation movies is going to happen. But not all displays of flesh are for titillation purposes. It is also a visual medium shorthand for vulnerability. Now, they talk a little bit after the clip about I Spit on Your Grave. Now, we'll get into that in more detail in its own episode. Oh boy, will we. But they totally miss the point. Yes, it's supposed to be disgusting, but that's what makes the cathartic release at the end so much more satisfying. Please, continue.
And that gets me worried about another thing. I know a lot of people are wondering, well, you know, people are going to see this film and imitate the behavior. Some people may. I don't know. But the majority of middle-class people are going to see these films. That's why they're such big hits. And I worry then about this idea, which is that when you view women constantly as sport, being stabbed, I think that's a sort of a sick notion that just sort of makes it's degrading. You view them as second class, that somehow this is acceptable behavior. You've said before that all movies tend to argue in favor of the behavior that they show. These are women as sport, to be stabbed. I think that's a bad idea. You know, they outlawed bullfighting because it was cruel. I almost have some of the same feeling toward these kinds of films.
These kinds of movies put some very bad ideas in society in the context of entertainment, yes.
I find it interesting that Gene very specifically calls out the middle class in that clip. One of the arguments that the moral guardians would use in pursuit of censoring these movies was that intellectuals would be able to handle viewing violence, but the poor and uneducated would see these movies and be driven into a frenzy with their uncontrolled base instincts. That we, intellectual people, would be able to handle looking at this rubbish without harm, merely an offense to taste, but the weaker minds of the working class would risk corruption and incitement to violence. That is far more disturbing to me than just seeing some titties on display and seeing some violence against women and men and whatever. That is a dangerous thought, my friends.
One of the things a short scene can't show you is that Halloween is directed and acted with a great deal more artistry and craftsmanship than the sleaze bucket movies we've been talking about. But there's another much more important difference. As you watch Halloween, your basic sympathies are always enlisted on the side of the woman, not with the killer. The movie develops its women characters as independent, intelligent, spunky, and interesting people. Halloween does not hate women.
Wait. No. Jason is the bad guy, and you're not supposed to root for him. Yes, the series did eventually shift from the counselors and opening the camp to focusing more on Jason's rampage, but you're still not supposed to root for him. Yes, you can cheer an awesome death. Yes, you can appreciate the good special effects from Tom Savini or whoever. But cheer for Jason, or Pinhead, or Leatherface, or Freddy, or Michael, or Cropsy? No, they're the bad guys.
Yeah, you know, when I saw that scene, I must admit I wasn't really worrying about the woman as much as I was placing myself in that closet and thinking about that killer, how I would handle it. And I was also appreciating the fact that I think Halloween not only doesn't hate women, but it loves film and filmmaking. That music is just fabulous. The way he starts one theme, then lays another thing on top of it, keeping the other theme. Really good. Also, the light coming through the slats in that closet. This is a film that's sort of up. That scene is up and you're jumpy, rather than getting depressed and feeling sorry and feeling sorry that you're even watching it. An upbeat thing.
You know, I think what you're touching on here is that artistry can redeem any subject matter.
Sure.
That's why I've always been opposed to censorship. I don't believe any subject matter should be off base.
Right.
The question is, what does the artist do with it? How does he look at it? How does he put it through his art in order to make a statement about it, or to make it into either a commercial film or a serious film? I believe that in the case of a movie like Halloween, we can engage in that joy of filmmaking that you talk about. That's not the case with the other films that really address themselves to the lowest possible common denominator.
Aha, and now the penny drops. A well-done movie? That's art. A cheap grindhouse movie? Those are sleazy garbage and not worth your time. Because it's made by Lloyd Kaufman and not Federico Fellini? It's trash. Because an Ingmar Bergman movie has more value than a Roger Corman flick. Come on, guys, you are better than that. The worth of art is a purely subjective thing. There are plenty of art house movies that I can't stand. But does that make them worthless? Hardly. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't misogynistic movies from sleazy directors that objectify women out there. When you have a movie that revolves around Nazis creating a genetic monster to fuck Jewish women to death, it's really hard to qualify that flick as art. And I'm not saying that Hollywood is perfect. You have fuckheads like Roman Polanski and Harvey Weinstein pretty much dismissing that notion. So yes, absolutely, we should be on guard against misogyny. But to dismiss an entire genre out of hand like that, well, that's not right either. Censorship is wrong, and we should push back against it wherever we can. And that's what I have to say about that. So thank you for indulging me. Please drop me an email at thevideonastyproject@gmail.com and tell me I'm full of shit and that I'm furthering the patriarchy. But after you tell me to fuck off, please come back here next time when me and my friends will dive deep into another nasty. See you then. Bye-bye.
Every town has an Elm Street.